to move us forward, I think we both have sort of these philosophical views, and a lot of those philosophical views that are shaped by philosophies of other founders. You're an avid reader, but I'm also curious, how does philosophy, and I mean that in the traditional sense, how does philosophy play a role, or how has it played a role in your career?
Yeah, I was a bit of a weird child. So I started reading Stoic philosophy from the time I was young. And I've read a lot of different philosophies. For whatever reason, the school of the Stoics is the one that spoke to me the most. And I think why it resonated was because I was a pretty high anxiety kid. And it's like not something that I realized at the time. I thought it was pretty normal. But as I got older, I reflected a lot more on, who I was as a child. And you mentioned the fact that like you can go through these business journeys, and I do know what it's like to build a successful business. I know what it's like when all that goes by the wayside and you seriously question, like, am I going to die? And I know that's like a strong word and thought to have. And then you go and you like rebuild the business, and then kind of like that question that you have to ask yourself, like, but did we die? And the answer is like, no. You start to learn that you can persevere and you can survive these things. So I was always searching for like, what's driving this anxiety, this inability to sit still, to want to go out to accomplish something and to build something. And it was driven into me for sure as a child, not by anything that my parents said. I mean, my dad specifically was very entrepreneurial and always wanted to run his own business. And my dad is no wordsmith by any means. English is his second language, but I watched it through his actions. And I finally started to be able to put names to the feelings that I was having when I started reading Stoic philosophy and really getting into that school, specifically Marcus Aurelius, a lot of work from Seneca. And it was 2,000 years old. And they were talking about a lot of the same concepts that we wrestle with today. And really the core of Stoicism is controlling yourself and focusing on yourself first and controlling your own mindset. And you're talking about a time roughly 2,000 years ago when there was disease and famine and constant war and constant takeover attempts. And you had an individual like Marcus Aurelius, who's the emperor of Rome, who's effectively the most powerful regime in the world. I mean, even more powerful than, let's say, an American president would be today. Like that level of control. They can point their army in any direction that they want. They can take over any land that they want. And this guy is journaling to himself in his room at night, talking about constraint, talking about treating people with fairness and kindness, talking about the right way to control his own emotions in the day to day. So not to let it get the best of him and to be able to wake up the next morning and go out and have an amazing day. And if you were to really understand the trials and tribulations that he was going through, he was not preaching. He was talking to himself. It wasn't until later that those journals actually became public. But this was a man who was saying, like, take it one day at a time. Do not suffer more than is necessary in advance of what's to come. And I think about that constantly because that is basically life. That is basically life. Some people have more privilege than others. We all start out from different backgrounds, socioeconomic means, different social circles. And then you become an adult and suddenly you've got to find your way in the world and you've got to go out and make the best of it. Or you can fold, you can be a victim, and you could say that my starting place is worse than others. Therefore, my ending place is going to be worse than others. And I think the same thing can be said about a business. It turns and twists so much and so fast, and no business plan ever starts the way that it should, right? You go back to the early days of what we were doing, and when you first joined us and the team, like, think about the original vision of where we thought we would be 4 or 5 years later. You think you're going to be like on an actual rocket ship to the moon, but in that is COVID and 2 crazy years that you never even thought in a million years, where in no financial model could you have imagined that the world was just going to shut down. Then, if you were to know that, even looking back in hindsight, you would say that would be a terrible thing for business. Well, actually, it was a really good thing for digital mortgage companies, terrible thing for society and the world. But everybody started doing things online. And 2020, 2021, and the first half of 2022 were the hottest real estate markets basically ever. back half of 22 to 23 and maybe just to the start of 2024 were pretty terrible markets. And then we started to get some turnaround and things start looking better. But if you weren't able to control your mindset through that journey, think about how high the highs would have been and how low the lows would have been. So you probably remember me preaching like cherish this journey throughout the entire process, because when you look back on this someday, it is a period of your life. You will not remember the finish line, but you will remember the journey, and you will remember the people that you worked with and the relationships that you had along the way. And